sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are. They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains, bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph or Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren, say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights, forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near, and all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't.
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And Tara Reid came out to say the man they tried to label the messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives. and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll remind you that you never saw the news attempt to sell us Donald Trump like he was morally upstanding or a decent human. But when Joe says something bigoted or ogles someone's little kid, CNN says, isn't this refreshing? Biden's like a mix of JFK and FDR with all the finer parts of Harry Truman. Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens. Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of 3-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that Tara Reade gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bares their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless. So don't you kid yourself that any lips are being loosened. They won't ever tell us where the bodies are or show us where the proof is. It's on you to recognize the lechery our president so regularly oozes. It's on you to muster up some honesty and ask yourself how Biden won your trust, but it's America that loses. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises. Open up your eyes and learn to recognize the bruises.
chips, brand new taxes, starving all the billionaires and neutering their Visa Maxes. Topple Congress off their axis, mobilize the homeless, give them axes, call it praxis. Chop a couple limbs off the legislative branches. We'll show you the difference between air as a human right and guaranteed oxygen access. Octogenarians who barely know what day it is are culling countless citizens while sitting on a dais made of ignorance that was built on the graves of the slaves made to labor for its self-declared significance. And all to build a Congress full of millionaires who make their fortunes insider trading while they shit on all the indigent. So I got a bone to pick with our leaders, and I'll start with the ligaments. Pick right through the muscle, dig the marrow out, and serve it to the unhoused millions living in their minivans or watching their belongings get evicted from their tenement. I have a dream where we breach the walls of Congress and just let them in. And what happens next will survive in only text, cause there won't be any evidence. There will only be that heavy kind of feeling that pervades a space where there has been a reckoning and you can feel its remnants. Let any man who enters seeking power know that those who came before him suffocated on their eminence. That there once was
Who are these people?
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of INN News. And as always, I have to fix stuff right at the beginning of the show because I didn't check. You know?
Didn't check.
Yeah, you're right now. It says you're indie left. Why is there not?
I could be indie.
You could be indie.
I could be indie.
Where's your name?
And I wanted to
That's
have
weird.
the work that he does, but I wouldn't mind being indie.
I definitely have. There it is. There you go. I fixed it. And then I also have to go to this weird spot and then turn on this, and then we're good. So anyway, I'm here with my lovely co-host as always, Collin. Collin, how are you, friend?
Not too bad.
Okay.
Today was a good day. This
Yes.
week.
Yesterday you got to see Roger Waters, which was fun.
What's that?
Yesterday you got to go watch Roger Waters in concert.
I did.
That seemed like a good time.
He performed in DC last night. The show was amazing. Anyone who is able to go, and depending where he's performing, definitely should go. Definitely worth the money I spent. Wasn't that much actually, but definitely worth the money I spent.
Right.
To see him. But yeah, so I mean, in the midst of some of the drama that has happened this week politically in the space, which we will talk about somewhat. I don't want to get too much into it in my rant. I think it's been a quiet week overall, it seems.
Yeah.
How have you been?
I've been all right. You know, I think I'm coming down with a bit of sickness. I woke up this morning hacking up a lung, which I normally don't do. You know, so we'll see how that goes. You might have
gotten a thing that I've had for like the last few weeks with this hacking persistent cough.
Yeah. But anyway, we should probably talk about the stories we have this week. Before we do, I wanted to showcase Tara Reid had the founder of the Uhuru movement / chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, if I remember all those acronyms correctly, on last Monday. People should go to her channel. If you look in the description below, find that indienews.network link. You'll find a Meet the Member section, which you can find Tara, and go to her YouTube channel and give that a like and watch if you haven't already. You know, that was a good stream. So, anything you need to plug real quick before we head into stories?
Yeah. So, actually, while we're here, let's do check-in. Let's see who's here. Anthony, great to see you.
What's up? Indy's here. I don't think anyone else is.
What's up? Hi, Indy.
Everyone else is shy. They haven't started talking in chat yet, but they will. You know. So, but anyway, we're also live on the Rockfins, and the Rumbles, just to make sure You can find links for those channels in that indienews.network thing below. If you want to support us on a place we're actually monetized, we always appreciate it. If I remember to check those channels while we're live, I will try to get to that. I don't always, so keep that in mind. That, you know, stoners always can't check every browser tab that I have open. But anyway, so we brought, you know, another 4-pack of stories this week. Very proud of my thumbnail on the top left. Heavy metal baby food. Heavy metal baby food. Like, that's going to be an interesting story. You're going to rant a little bit on the drama that happened this week.
Yeah.
You know, that should be fun. I always like, you know, yelling at this guy. Iran responded to nuclear deal stuff. We'll talk about that. And you've got a section on Prof. Wolff.
Well, more specifically, he tweeted an article about evictions, the very thing that last summer I remember a certain person asking certain congresswomen about.
I remember a certain person.
Yeah, and it's still happening.
Right.
And no one's talking about it.
Crazy, right?
Well, so we're gonna read said article that Professor Wolff tweeted out.
Cool. I'll get started with my story. So for all the parents out there who are about to have a new child and or have one of those hatchlings that, you know, just popped out, 94% of prepackaged and homemade U.S. baby foods contain toxic heavy metals, says a study. The FDA must go beyond the baby food aisle and set strong standards for these contaminants, said the National Director of Healthy Babies and Bright Futures. And this is an article from Kenny Stancil at Common Dreams. So Anthony Willecki asking about the 10%. But so this was apparently already known about, and now this is like kind of class actioning, apparently. So almost all of the baby foods that parents in the United States feed their children, whether purchased at the store or prepared at home, contain detectable amounts of toxic heavy metals that can impair brain development, according to new research published Thursday, which led to renewed demands for improved regulation. So, a previous study, which I mentioned, by Health Babies Bright Futures, found that 95% of prepackaged baby foods tested were contaminated with toxic heavy metals, including lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury, sparking a congressional investigation and conversations about whether homemade baby foods are a safer alternative. Every day that the FDA delays is another day babies' developing brains are harmed by toxic chemicals, right? So in an effort to determine if homemade purees and foods purchased outside the baby food aisle have lower heavy metals than pre-made store-bought baby food, the donor-funded alliance of scientists and nonprofits recently tested 288 foods and examined more than 7,000 additional food tests from published studies. HBBF found no evidence to suggest that homemade baby food was lower in heavy metal levels than store-bought brands. Lead author Jane Houlihan, the alliance's research director, and Charlotte Brody, its national director, wrote in the newly released report, heavy metal levels varied widely by food type, not by who made the food. Notes the analysis from HBBF, which seeks to reduce infants' exposure to damaging neurotoxins.
Well, wait. So
yes.
Heavy metal levels vary widely by food type.
Yes. Yep.
I didn't know food was meant to have heavy metals in it.
Yes. Right. We'll get into it a little.
Okay.
So, the alliance's key findings include 94% of all food samples were tested. I just had to grab my notes. 94% of all food samples were tested contained detectable amounts of toxic heavy metals. 94% of store-bought baby food and 94% of homemade purees and family baby foods. Family brand foods. Rice cakes and crisp rice cereal are heavily contaminated with arsenic. They contain higher levels of inorganic arsenic. That's the toxic form. They contain a higher level of inorganic arsenic than any other foods tested. Both stand out as foods to avoid for children and adults alike. Lead, arsenic, and cadmium levels are high in some fresh carrots and sweet potatoes. We recommend that parents vary the source by choosing from different brands, varieties, or stores each week to avoid accidentally serving a high metal source often. The 10 most heavily contaminated foods consumed by babies, beginning with the highest, are rice cakes, crisp rice cereal, rice-based puffs, brown rice, rice-based teething biscuits and rusks, white rice, raisins, teething crackers in non-rice version, granola bars with raisins, and oat ring cereal. The 10 least contaminated foods consumed by babies, beginning with the lowest, are bananas, grits, baby food brand meats, butternut squash, lamb, apples, pork, eggs, oranges, and watermelon.
So basically the Whole Foods.
Some, yes. Like
basically.
Yeah. As
like
opposed to just
about
rice-based.
That's questionable, but like
yeah.
But basically like the Whole Foods generally seem to be
most of. I mean, corn seems like a less likely, like in grits, as far as like if you're gonna make like a porridge mush, right? Because like they have oat-based stuffed up here too, so I imagine that's like Cheerios, are in here, and like granola bars, right? Like that kind of stuff, but baby food brand meat. Is there any meat-based baby foods?
Like the only ones I think of is like the Gerber, like turkey or chicken.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
those are a thing.
So yeah, and grits. So start. Don't put sugar in there though. Don't you do it. Don't you do that. But anyway. So Mark Corkins. There's some fun names in this story. Chair of the Committee of Nutrition for the American Academy of Pediatrics, considers Thursday's study to be a logical follow-up to the one that the HBBF conducted in 2019, after which many experts encourage parents to switch to homemade options. With the publication of its new report, HBBF has come back and said we sent shoppers into all sorts of stores, and guess what? The food you're making it from is high in heavy metals as well, Corkins told The Hill. The source is going to be the same no matter what, he continued. It's going to be farms and produce grown in dirt and water. That's the same dirt and water that the other produce is grown in. So, yeah.
But I think just overall the fact that there's even like these metals and it seems to be like like foreign to farmland, it seems, like is questionable as to why is that there? Why is that in our farmlands to begin with?
Right.
And then just what can be done about it. And it's funny because I know like in Europe, they're strict, just as far as like certain chemicals, and certain preservatives are banned in Europe, I think in part for this reason.
Yeah.
And we don't have necessarily those regulations here. So it doesn't surprise me that they're finding this, but I think just the idea is like, almost no matter what you do or no matter what you eat is almost going to be like the inevitable in some way, which is kind of like, especially when you're thinking about babies, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it also kind of brings into the class issue because, like many families may not have the time necessarily to make their own baby food, for their kids. So often than not, especially if you're low income, you're going to resort to like the Gerber packaged stuff,
right?
Which those in itself are not very good. But then like, They're going to contain the things that are, well, they're going to be chock full of preservatives anyway, which are probably not good for babies anyway. But they're going to be chock full of other stuff that especially aren't good for babies, which will affect their health and development.
Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, it's definitely like, it's always felt that way. The more income you have, the healthier your children probably will be. But it's just showing that like how much our foods normally are contaminated with poisons, essentially.
Right.
So in a statement released in response to the report, the AAP reiterated its call for swift, comprehensive federal regulation of heavy metals in foods that babies eat. In the meantime, the group added, families can reduce exposure by feeding babies a variety of foods. So, the House Subcommittee on Economic and Consumer Policy revealed last Friday that leading baby food manufacturers are knowingly selling products tainted with dangerous levels of arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury. Heavy metals that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the World Health Organization have declared a human health hazard, particularly for infants and toddlers, who are most vulnerable to their serious, often irreversible, and sometimes deadly effects. To date, however, the FDA has set limits for heavy metals in just 2 types of baby food: infant rice cereal and juice. The agency's Closer to Zero plan identifies steps the agency will take to reduce exposure to arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury from foods eaten by babies and young children to as low as possible. But as HBBF pointed out on social media, the FDA is moving at a snail's pace to take meaningful action and jeopardizing the neurological development and long-term health of countless babies. So, like this tweet here from the HBBF, currently the FDA's deadline to propose draft action levels for arsenic in April 2024. Our study on heavy metals in baby food came out in 2019, and every day that the FDA delays is another day babies' developing brains are harmed by toxic chemicals, right? And this is the Rockland Times that they're referencing here. And that was they posted that tweet on August 11th. The Alliance has started a petition, which I have that petition in my notes. If I just grab this and put it in the chat below. So the Alliance has started a petition calling on FDA Commissioner Robert Califf to urgently end the legal contamination of baby food and improve the future of our country by moving his agency away from business as usual. Parents shouldn't have to worry about the safety of their babies, meals, and snacks, Houlihan said in a statement, but until the FDA sets protective limits, the good news is that parents can skip and swap out certain foods to limit toxic chemical exposure. The HBBF advocates for what it calls a two-pronged kitchen and country approach. Until foods with reliably low heavy metal levels are widely available, parents can choose to prepare foods in a way that significantly reduces babies' exposures, states the report, which is accompanied by a 2-page tip sheet for caregivers. So I have that tip sheet, but the most important step, says the report, is to introduce and serve a variety of healthy foods, whether baby food brands or homemade foods. Serving the same food every day for a long time can accidentally concentrate one or more contaminants in a child's diet. A varied diet avoids this and ensures a healthy mix of nutrients too. So, the EDF Health says our partner HBBF.org offers great advice to parents and caregivers on choosing safer foods for young children, right? So, this is kind of where they start with like the limit or rotate section, right? So like cantaloupe, keep the diet but less than daily. Canned fruit, better choice, fresh, frozen, or baby food fruit, apparently. Dried fruit, avoid. And like crisp rice cereal, rice cakes, right? But like peeled and chilled cucumber, frozen banana, like trying to look at fresh and frozen fruit, baby food fruits, baby food fresh or frozen, green beans, peas, butternut squash, and the baby food brand meats, eggs, soft or pureed meats and beans, and like pretty much no cereals or grains, right?
Right. But again,
yeah,
like this for me kind of speaks to a lot of issues. It speaks to, one, I think given inflation, like food is just expensive across the board. So it's like parents are spending a lot more for food. Number two, the idea of access, like if you're in a more affluent area, you
or if you're
probably
in a food
have a
desert,
variety of, grocery stores or even farmers markets that you can go to, versus in like low income areas where there may not be much, if any, and you having to travel out, depending where, like to either drive or take public transportation in order to get to the richer areas if these foods are not necessarily available to you. And then three, the idea of like fresher foods, the whole foods are generally going to cost more.
yeah,
So families who are able to do it and have the means to do it, will be able to get the better food for their kids. Whereas if you're low income, if you don't have access, you're just going to have to do with what is available to you. And that's usually the more processed food, which again, not that great for you, but they're loaded generally with a lot of extra shit that you shouldn't be feeding your kids. So, and it's not surprising, of course, that our government, is not making a big deal about this because fuck them kids, but this is why I mean when we talked about Roe v. Wade, in terms of like, you want women to have babies, maybe against their will, depending on the circumstance, to give birth to those kids, but you can't feed those kids or you can't feed them properly depending on your situation. Like we don't talk about this, but it's very easy to say, like have the baby. I'm not, like this,
in
I
Florida,
feel is a part of the pro-life stance that I feel like especially conservatives should be taking, but they don't.
No. But it continues a little bit. The burden shouldn't fall on parents to navigate the risk, the report says. FDA should establish and enforce protective limits for heavy metals in all foods consumed by baby and children. Heavy metal contamination spans all the food aisles of the grocery store. The report points out FDA safety standards must as well. Standards extending beyond the baby food aisle would encompass foods eaten during pregnancy as well, a crucial time for lowering toxic metal exposures. In a statement, Brody said that the FDA's Closer to Zero program needs to live up to its name and set limits that will make the heavy metal contamination of our food much closer to zero. To get the levels of heavy metals meaningfully closer to zero, she added, FDA must go beyond the baby food aisle and set strong standards for these contaminants. So across the board, pretty much.
Right. But I think not even, why we just limit it to baby food? I think why not all food for everybody? And also I just had a thought, just I was thinking of, and I'm only relating to this because I actually kind of talked about this with my pre-K class. Well, this past school year, just certain plastics, may be kind of toxic. And depending, how they're packaged, even in certain foods could be an issue too, because many foods are typically packaged in plastic. I think it's cheap, but they may not necessarily be the best thing, as far as transporting, or even worse, having it sit in those plastics for however long, depending how long on their shelf before you consume it, can also be a problem too. It's just something that I also thought about.
Yeah.
That may not necessarily be addressed either.
Like it's interesting that like the study had kind of already came out and not much was done, and now it's just like continued to go, well, it's really food across the board it just has a problem with, so but interesting that somebody's trying to speak up and at least educate people on how you can avoid the problem. So figure that's the least we could do. So but
again, it's just too bad that once again this kind of speaks to class issue in this country that no one is really addressing too hard, or well, class/economics.
So Anthony Malecki, microplastics are found in every newborn. Yep. Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's like, I was trying to remember, the life expectancy in America went down dramatically, like in the last, like 2, 3, 4 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
But again, given what is allowed, quote unquote, the chemicals or preservatives are allowed in food.
Yeah.
Whereas in other countries they're banned, it's it's not surprising to me. But I think, especially if you're a new parent or about to be one, I think that's definitely something. I don't think we think about it too much. It's just like food is food. We'll just give our baby whatever.
Yeah.
Not whatever, but I don't think we think about this a lot.
McDonald's.
I think just even as far as how you package food, especially after you're done with it, I think is something that I think everyone should kind of consider doing in terms of like ensuring your health, like especially if you don't want to have any long-term issues like cancer or something like that, which can be related to how we're packaging our food too. So
I put a PDF in the chat above that gave tips and stuff if people want to take that and share that. They're welcome to. If any new parents out there might need that. So you have a bit of stuff to talk about.
Not really. This rant is obviously, it's usually around the hot topic of the week, and obviously the Briahna Joy Greg Cenk debate that really wasn't debate, but like debate was obviously the thing that people were talking about. Like, and for the sake of time and the sake of not hurting anyone's ears or having people throw up, we're not going to subject you to all of that. I know Nick and CJ and RBN did a very extensive critique on it on a recent stream. I know Savvy as well also did.
I know Orf did a little compilation,
and then Podlands Media also did extensive like talks about this. So we don't need to rehash too much, but I think there's a couple of things I want to mention that kind of relate to things that we've talked about before. And shout out to Midnight Crab. He actually wanted to be here tonight, but his mom wouldn't allow him to stay up late. No, I'm kidding. He had current commitment that he messed up the days, so he wasn't able to be here. But maybe if he pops in the chat, he might be able to say it. But basically, I think you guys remember, like I did a rant on how, like for a time, like the boutique called people who made a critique, on like, the squad, Bernie, whoever, like nihilist. I did a rant on that months ago. And now it seems to be the phrase now that people are calling each other if you kind of critique somewhat of a lefty figure or policy, especially if it may be within the right wing who are kind of saying these policies, is a fake leftist. Case in point, I got called a fake leftist last week. Not gonna say who, but
which is like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean?
It wasn't even me, but it was in the context of what was said. It was just kind of random and just kind of out there. But I kind of figured now, since Briahna Joy Gray is now being called a fake leftist, now I think that might be the phrase du jour that the boutique left is using to kind of undermine people who, who are quote unquote seemingly like aligning with the right wing, whatever that means. So actually, Reef, I think you might need to remove one of these screens. There we go.
Yeah, I was about to.
So thank you. So I wouldn't call her a friend, but definitely, in this case,
I aligned with her
said here
on defunding the FBI. Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't say this is what kind of started it off, but this kind of tipped it off for a lot of people, you know, she kind of tipped off a lot of people in regards to this.
Yeah.
So she said in a tweet, I think it was last week, but this is what I got from Monday. Impeach Merrick Garland and defund the corrupt FBI, end political persecution and hold those accountable that abuse their positions of power to persecute their political enemies while ruining our country. This shouldn't happen in America. Republicans must force it to stop. So honestly, I don't see an issue with this.
Yeah.
And, you know, and like Marjorie Taylor Greene was calling for abolishing the FBI, which Briahna Joy Gray kind of retweeted and mentioned that in her radar on Rising. I believe it may have been last week or early in the week, that set off a lot of people, including TYT's own Cenk who basically called Briahna Joy Gray a fake leftist. So Briahna basically said, you know, I would like to talk to you more about this, basically like why, like unpack that, like what makes her a fake leftist. So again, I'm sure a lot of you have seen you know, the debate by now. If you haven't, you're probably better off.
Would you like me to do an impression of it? I can do it real quick.
Sure.
Jimmy, 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 Jimmy Jam, Jam, Jimmy, like Jimothy Door, like Jim, like that's all it was. Talking to Briahna anyway. Yeah.
So on Rising, they mentioned Briahna Joy Gray makes the case that conservatives are correct that the FBI is coming for American people. Right. And so Briahna said, Marjorie Taylor Greene is right about the FBI, bad faith or not. In today's radar, I argued that the left should take advantage of the right's new acknowledgement of systematic bias and push to abolish the FBI. An institution has always protected elite power, not the people. Anyone on the left shouldn't have an issue with this, you know? So I definitely agree with that, given the FBI's history, you know, but people were, again, just up in arms. Cenk were up in arms. But I think it was interesting that people saw this tweet without watching her radar to get the nuance of it.
Yes.
You know?
As always.
Cenk obviously did not watch her video.
No.
So he basically looked like a jackass the entire time, which is not hard to do. But
he complained about Mate and Greenwald, and like he was very upset.
Right.
You know.
So again, we're not going to watch too much of this, but I think because it was basically a lot of ranting on Cenk's part and Bree trying to essentially calming down off and on for like the first half hour.
Yes.
And then eventually after that half hour, it started to get, you know, more civil. They were able to have a better conversation. But I wanted to play this last part because this relates to stuff that you and I have talked about, you know,
frequently
in past episodes. But I think especially in IBN, you know, what we're trying to accomplish with our network.
Yeah.
Which I think Bree kind of hits the hammer on the head on. So we'll watch it. I might stop it, or I might ask you to stop it just to kind of critique, and then we'll talk more about it. So let's see.
Roll the footage. Oh, it almost did it for you.
I said
go to something you did recently as an example, okay? And you talk, and I think it's a good example. So you talked about how when Marjorie Taylor Greene says defund the FBI, hey, maybe that's not such a bad point, okay? So now that's a good place where, again, subtlety and nuance are gonna be really, really important, okay? So if I saw your segment where you were talking about, hey, look, the FBI has this terrible history of oppressing the powerless, in favor of the powerful. That's totally true. We totally agree, okay? And if you're getting agreement from the right wing, now this is important, but in an earnest way, about police reform, law enforcement reform, what did we talk about? What did I say earlier? Take yes for an answer, right? So far, okay, that's good, agreed, right? But then I think it's incumbent to clarify, but the right wing doesn't actually mean it. It's not like you're gonna get Marjorie Taylor, hold on, let me finish and then you respond. It's not like you're gonna get Marjorie Taylor Greene to go, oh my God, you're so right. We should do police reform. These cops are being so abusive towards African Americans. No, what she's trying to say is if we get in charge, we're not gonna let them hold us accountable. We're gonna destroy rule of law by getting rid of anyone at the FBI who doesn't agree with us politically. Don't you see that?
So if you watch my clip, the first sentence and also the last paragraph is all about exactly that. So yeah, I agree. Okay,
great. But then I'm gonna show a clip, a tweet of Marjorie Taylor Greene agreeing with you, and then I wanna get your reaction to it. So I'm not doing this without you. We didn't do it on the show and go ha or anything like that. And in fact, I'm genuinely curious what your reaction to it. So let's look at that. So here, in response to you saying Marjorie Taylor Greene is right about the FBI, she says our government has become an institution that protects and serves the elites while the people suffer under the American last ruling class. We must defund the FBI, dismantle the Department of Justice, and gut the agencies of political biases and persecutions. I believe in the people. So what I see there, and I'm curious what you see, is her pretending that the right wing is populist and that they're doing this on behalf of the American people. When in reality, what she's saying is, if we get back in charge, there ain't gonna be no rule of law. We're gonna take out the Department of Justice, we're gonna take out the FBI, then they're gonna run roughshod. I do not agree to that at all. So I'm curious what your take on it is.
I think it's pretty funny since like millions of thousands of leftists, she also seems to have not watched the video because I doubt that she would retweet a video where she was called a broken clock who's only right twice a day and a bad faith actor. So I am a co-host at Rising, and Rising's audience is a much more conservative audience than what you have here at TYT or what I have at Bad Faith. And when you're speaking to people who are not there for you, Robbie's been on the show much longer than I have, and the audience is largely there for him. They're very libertarian in their bent. They are anti-establishment. They're frustrated with corporate parties, but they've definitely leaned right, especially on cultural issues. I find that I'm able to get more engagement with the video and more engagement with my points that I think are substantive. I spent most of my video talking about communism. Now the FBI has been an enemy of the left. To meet them where they are and say, look, the left is as concerned, nay, more concerned about the issue than the right. And here's the real people who are advocating for this and not in a self-interested way. And the point I make at the end of the video is, I don't believe Marjorie Taylor Greene is acting in good faith, but I believe you might be. And to the extent that you, the audience, is acting in good faith, here's what we should do, come over to the left. I'm addressing conservative audiences or kind of partyless audiences, people who are quote unquote persuadable voters. I'm not doing this for Marjorie Taylor Greene's notice or interest. I'm doing, because she is in fact obviously a bad faith actor, but you have to address the people who see her as acting in good faith. That's comms. Just because I know her and she is a bad actor, but some of the people in the audience are people who genuinely believe what she's saying. So the point is to say, okay, let me just accept on face value that you really are into this. Let me tell you what the FBI really is, and let's develop a plan on my own turf about how to address this issue. And I talked to the boys over at the Vanguard earlier today, and they raised some interesting points about how well, if she is able to set the agenda, her version of getting rid of the FBI is gonna be all about protecting, yes, elite power, the way that the FBI has always done, and avoiding accountability. I think that's a really legitimate point. That is why instead of, I don't know, spending a long day attacking me on the internet, what I would love for leftists to be doing is to think critically and get our historians and our theorists together and think critically about what it would look like to either restructure or abolish the FBI so that it really did become about accountability for elites instead of harassing leftists and other marginalized groups as it has done historically.
But Briahna, do you get that?
But we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
You know, like basically what Briahna has talked about essentially is kind of the basis of organizing.
Yeah.
You know, like it's one thing for a politician to kind of say, like, especially on the right, who might take a lefty talking point and be like, oh, I support this. Fine. Okay.
Right.
So, but then as Briahna Joy Gray said, you know, okay, you know, take it to the people, because especially within the right wing, you know, and this is what I'm being in this space for a while, like this is what I've learned, you know, it's not so much, you know, like people in government, you know, that we really need to kind of convince, is the working class that we need to convince. And I think generally, like, I'm sure that I could talk to people who identify on the right, you know, like, but would agree that the FBI would need to be abolished. Now, I think there's going to be something that I'm going to relate to this later, but I think we associate a lot of bills and a lot of policy with personalities. Like the idea of like Medicare for all, for example, like people associate that with Bernie, you know, but that shouldn't be the case. That should be something in terms of the people, which now, you know, according to, you know, like recent studies, about, I would say like 70% of the country now supports Medicare for all.
Right.
You know, and about half Republicans also support it. So, you know, so now it's a very popular policy, you know.
Well,
so
that's
the
also
idea
with,
that I think
with this specific issue, defunding, like getting rid of the FBI or defunding it or whatever does not, it's like Cenk specifically and like a few others in this fake leftist, which that's the real fake leftist, in my opinion. You know, that it's like they will cheer on broader reach of three-letter agencies just because they go after the team they don't like.
Right.
You know, and that's irresponsible, one, like, but then to act like that's the correct position to take and be high and mighty over it, like, I don't understand either. Like, right. You know, it's like his argument was essentially Marjorie Taylor Greene is bad, therefore, you know, don't you think that she's acting in like bad faith when she says this? Which, like, if I was talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm not going to tell her that then.
Right.
Like,
and it's funny, like, and this is one thing I will critique Brie on, was Henry Quayle was also raided by the FBI.
Yeah.
You know, no one has mentioned that. It's so
Fred
funny.
Hampton
like,
was murdered by the, like, I mean, you could go.
It's funny, you know, like, I feel like people on the left, especially when this happened, were calling, me included, were calling that out immediately. Now, like, I think to kind of justify the fact that it was Trump, that now a lot of the boutique left are kind of mentioning Malcolm X, MLK, Fred Hampton, you know, all those people, you know, who were, you know, assassinated by the FBI, like, as kind of like the gotcha, you know, but it's like, we've been talking about this, you know, especially as Black people, we've always had, you know, I think generally in this country, a very like kind of like, we always have given like the FBI, well, cops in general, the side eye, you know, but it's the idea that Brie is saying, you know, you got to take it to the people, because especially that could be an opportunity for them to learn, you know, and be like, okay, let's see where we connect. Let's see, you know, what we can study and research as far as, you know, what is the reality of, in this case, of the FBI and all of that. And let's start making demands, you know, as far as what legislation should be like in connection with that, you know? So that's how you build coalitions, you know? But of course, because it's the idea of like, oh, a right winger said it, and if you're on the left, you agree with it, then somehow that equates you to being a right-winger.
Being right-winger, right. Like, it's like secret right-wing. They're all playing secret Hitler at home.
Right.
You know?
Which makes no sense, because it's like, it shouldn't be about the person. I don't care who says it.
Right.
If it's right, it's right. Doesn't matter who says it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a matter, and Bree will get into this in the second half, but it's like, but yeah, lots of people have said the FBI is shit.
Mm-hmm.
So call people to that, bring people around that idea and organize around that.
Right.
So let's continue. The second part.
Go to something you did recently as an example, okay? And you
that's where we left off, where we were like,
I'm addressing conservative audiences or kind of
like right in there
is acting in good faith. Here's what we should do. Come over to the left. And she's a bad actor, but some of the people in the audience are people points about how like, well, if she is able to set the agenda, her version of getting rid of the FBI is going to be.
Briahna, do you get that when at a moment when the FBI is finally doing something right and holding an elite like an ex-president accountable on his massive law breaking, that when you say Marjorie Taylor Greene is right, that it appears to some, I understand your point that you're making about reaching out to the right-wing audience that's watching. I totally get it. And from time to time, I think that makes sense politically, okay? But again, we need nuance here. But in this time, it allows them to say, you see that? Reasonable people on the left agree with us. The FBI is political and they're targeting Donald Trump based on politics. That it seems.
But I didn't say.
I know, and that's why I'm asking you about
Marjorie Taylor Greene in that tweet.
They definitely are.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's quote tweet. She doesn't even make that argument.
But you know that that's the argument she's saying in this context.
Well,
she tweeted about how defund the FBI right after the raid. You know that that's what it's about. No, what I'm asking, Briahna, is do you see how it might be perceived as helping their talking point that the FBI is targeting Trump unfairly and for political reasons?
The right is exploiting this moment for what they want, and I'm exploiting this moment for what I want. That's all I can do. I, Briahna Joy Gray, with my small platform and 60,000 YouTube subscribers, are not platforming or influencing Marjorie Taylor Greene, a sitting congresswoman's behavior. I think that that's laughable. But what I think is very irresponsible is for the left not to take advantage of the genuine interest that many people have across the political spectrum in holding the FBI accountable. Cops sometimes arrest bad guys and do the right thing. Sometimes cops stop a rape in progress and capture someone who's been drunk driving before they can hurt someone. Sometimes that happens. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to advocate for overwhelming police reform, abolishment, or whatever it is, because that's the right thing to do. And we need to be coming up with structural alternatives to do the things that cops are supposed to be doing, while not covering for all of the misconduct and the structural problems with the police force, just because sometimes they behave right. And I think the same thing with the FBI. It is completely cogent to say, I believe Donald Trump should be held accountable for whatever crime he might have committed. At the same time that you say, the organization that's undertaking this search has a credibility issue because it spent 85% of its resources, as I talk about in my clip, 85% of its time going after people like Muhammad Ali, Elvis Presley, and Martin Luther King and Fred Hampton, and only 15% of its time going after the Ku Klux Klan.
But today they're going after Donald Trump. So then that gets to the issue of genuine, whether they're genuine or not. And I think this is.
Of course they're not, and I said that many times in my radar.
Okay, but let's break that down. And this is a good moment. This is a good thing to, I think, end on. So look, if I sense the right wing is genuine, they're actually voting with us. So for example, they're anti-war. They're saying the president needs to get congressional authorization, and they voted that way. Great, no problem. A vote's a vote. It's as genuine as it gets, right? So I say yes to that. But if they say, hey, Cenk, I care about law enforcement reform, right when Donald Trump's getting busted by law enforcement. And by the way, if we win, I'm not gonna do any of the reform you want. Instead, I'm gonna make it.
Go ahead.
I wanna pause here for a second.
Yeah.
Cenk just then conflated fucking justice reform being a right-wing thing. I mean, I know he's like trying to make an example, but he's also saying that that's what they're saying. No, they're saying defund the FBI. Like, which I wouldn't say is necessarily law enforcement. Like, that's not something I think about in law enforcement reform. That's like government overreach reform. Like,
right.
You know,
and it's funny, you know, and I think I could say this here, you know, they're talking about Trump, you know,
right?
Of course,
but
they didn't talk about Henry Quayle, but whatever. But
I mean, this is still Cenk stuck on Russiagate for now. Right. He's still stuck. He still thinks that the walls are closing in any day now. Like,
right. No one, to my knowledge, besides RBN and maybe a couple of other channels, like Tara had the chairman of the Yahoo movement on Monday.
Right. Yeah.
No one has talked about that.
No. Democracy Now! Like, and Tara Reid. That's it.
Right.
Like, I mean, Nico's talked about tons of people have talked about the actual raid that the FBI committed on the Uhuru movement on a 70-year-old man with drones, flashbangs, and a tank. They sent a tank to this guy's house. Like, you know, not any of that's talked about. The TYT will never have someone like that on, you know. Right. So, but I just find it funny that they like, now if you believe in justice reform and are right wing, you're also bad because Trump.
Right. No, right, because of Trump. And that's the thing.
Yes.
It's like Trump is getting the attention, you know, so because Trump is bad and because now people are defending him, then you by proxy must be a bad person too. You
right.
know, like you're trying, like it's somehow twisting the idea of like, oh, you're protecting Trump. No, This is not the idea of protecting Trump. It's the idea that throughout history, the FBI has done shady shit.
They're coming after the African People's Socialist Party for McCarthyite nonsense.
Right.
And this is just one instance of the FBI, let alone the CIA and the ATF, which I think also should go. You know, right. But like, anyway, we'll finish this up.
Way worse. Yeah. I go, well, that's not genuine. And this is not a moment that I want to help them with their completely disingenuous concern about law enforcement.
I think that's
make it genuine. Right. Call their bluff.
Right. That's politics.
Should be.
That's politics.
Let's see if they do something on it. I'll play ball. Like,
it's an excellent point. You know how I would nail them on this? Wouldn't it be incredible if in response to this moment, the left actually drafted a plan that they could vote on to actually reform the FBI in a meaningful
Thank you, Bree.
way? Wouldn't it be incredible if instead of letting Marjorie Taylor Greene stomp and posture on the internet about this sort of thing, that we called her bluff with a piece of legislation that would actually do what the left thinks would be a good response right now, a response that creates accountability for Donald Trump, but which also cuts at the meat of some of the skepticism that the right has about whether or not the FBI can conduct an impartial investigation. That's what I would really love to see in this moment. Call her to the mat, force the vote, make her prove whether or not she is a good faith actor or a bad faith actor. I think that would be much more productive in this context than sitting around just saying online she's a bad faith actor. Well, we all know that, but the people who support her or the people who are open to having this conversation, they don't know that. And there's only one way they can know that. It's by good faith actors getting in there and actually doing what we think should be done instead of just criticizing and complaining and critiquing others.
So.
Right. So basically with this, it's like the idea.
All right, welcome to the conversation.
Oh, no, we're done.
Yeah.
Like a couple of things. And then I think there's another video there, but
I got it here.
Like a minute.
Yep.
Okay. But so a couple of things. One, Bree made a very good point that I think a lot of people made. It's not the idea of like people on the left are supporting Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like we know she's shit, you know, but in the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene authentic or not, is capitalizing on an issue for her benefit. Bree makes the argument like, okay, she says the left, I'm going to use the squad. Like, why can't the squad do the same thing to capitalize it for their benefit? You know, and we've noticed that with the squad that they've had chance after chance after chance after chance after chance to do that, They didn't force the vote,
No.
for, bringing Medicare for all. They didn't force the vote to get $15 minimum wage. They didn't force the vote as far as, funding Capitol Police more. They didn't force the vote as far as, giving money to Ukraine, even though Cory Bush was like, yeah, I agree that we should support Ukraine, but I have doubts as far as where the money is going.
Right.
So,
I mean,
the critique,
not to mention nothing on Julian. In fact, if anything, Cenk has like now called Julian a liar, right? Like, on top of, I'm pretty sure they endorsed Biden, right? During
apparently Julian is anti-Semite now because he supports Palestine.
Right. They're literally going to go against. I mean, it's almost like Anna took notes with Madeleine Albright.
Right.
Like, it's crazy to me that it's still Julian. No mention of Tara during that whole Biden, situation. Like, I mean, anyway, you're going to talk about another lady who's deciding to take.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's funny now after the announcement that was made on TYT today. Because guess who agreed, at least at one point, with what Briahna was saying?
I wonder who.
Yeah. Let's play the clip and see what old friend Nina Turner has to
what
say.
Christian Small is doing, there are Starbucks right here in my city, whether it's Clifton Avenue or West 6th Street or the one in Maple Heights, or excuse me, not Maple Heights, Mayfield Road in Cleveland Heights, just all of the various Starbucks right here in the greater Cleveland area. All of those wins and attempts to give people so much courage. What happened in Staten Island probably, is owed to what they were able to do in Bessemer, Alabama. Even though they didn't come with the brass ring, it was just one more step in the right direction and one more move to motivate people to keep on fighting. So it's the combination of all of these things that I believe that the progressive movement should look at as we critique and judge ourselves and not get caught up in what the mainstream media has to say about this movement, because the overwhelming majority of the American people are right where this movement is. They might not, Crystal, and they might not, Kyle, call themselves progressives. If we take the label off and you just talk to people about, is your health care enough? Is it serving you? Are you making enough money on your job? Would you like to see things change in this society that gives you more than a fighting chance to live out your greatest greatness? Most people, no matter how they identify politically, are going to say, yeah, I would like to see more done. That unionist movement is an example of that.
Unity.
You got people who were probably Bernie-crats, Clintonites, Trumpites, Green Party, no party, all united based on what they had in common.
I gotta find it.
What they had in common was a drive and a determination to say, we deserve more, we deserve better. We're going to put our political ideology on the side and fight like hell to get that better. And that's benefits, that's wages, and that's work conditions. This is the roadmap that the progressive movement needs to use so that we keep on fighting. We cannot get weary in well-doing.
Exactly.
Right. So Nina, a few months ago, when it was okay, basically said, we need to form coalitions with people who are not like us in order to get shit done.
Right.
Which I think, in light of the fact now that we now know she's going to be a full-time employee of TYT now, basically, this in a way, it's slapping like Briahna Joy Gray in the face, essentially, because really, and I think it's interesting, like, in the midst of what Briahna was saying, Nina didn't come to defend her.
No.
Which I think, but I think really, and Nick, I believe, made this point, now, like, because Briahna basically has said that, oh, Bernie abandoned the movement, which is something that we've been saying for a while, but now as she being the former press secretary for Bernie, is now saying, basically Bernie ain't shit.
Right.
All the Bernie-crats basically are now basically like, Briahna, you're dead to me, basically. So I think now, and I think especially with TYT, because they're making basically bank off the squad and Bernie, they can't, she poses a problem. But
Right.
it's a lot easier now to smear Brie now than to kind of deal with the reality of like, if you want things passed, you have to build coalitions to people who are not like you. And this is something that I've been very sick of, like as of late, because it's almost like for people who are like who want Medicare for all, it's like only lefties, especially if you're the purest of lefties, that you should have Medicare for all. If you're a right winger, be damned with you. Like, that's kind of like the attitude that I feel among people on the left, is that attitude. Like, I remember like last year, I had a guy connect with me on Twitter who is a Republican, asked me if he should attend the marches for Medicare for all. And he asked that because he felt like, because it was so like intense on the left during that time, that he felt like he wouldn't be included, or he felt like he would be attacked if he went.
Yeah.
Like, that's how bad it gets sometimes. Like, when people on the right agree with us, then it's like, and again, as Bree said, and I don't think this is an issue necessarily with the working class, but I think more so with politicians, it's the idea of like, as she said, call their bluff out. Squad, where are you? If you're a Democrat and if you believe in those two, call their bluff.
Right.
Form legislation. Bernie has done this many times.
Right.
Worked on the right in order to get things.
Fred Hampton. I mean, you could go back to almost all, like, that's who you're trying to reach. Technically. Like, you need them to support you and not, like, anyway. I feel like we've said all these things multiple times to these people, and they still don't listen,
Right. And, and we've said it a lot at INN, like, this is what we're trying to do on this network and the show, is to try to build coalitions and
without
help us
labels.
Understand, the idea of what, as we say, like, labels are bad, say independent. We want to take off the labels of these issues that have become so tribal, in politics, and really focus on what people need, so we can activate together, as a community, so that we can help, these people. And there might actually be some tangible ways that we can do that.
Yeah.
So definitely stay tuned for that. But here's a tweet that I found like the other day that I want to pull up.
Yeah, it's most of the pushback, right?
From Screen Legend Anthony Quinn's undershirt. Okay. But he said, most of the pushback you're getting on, I guess, to Bree, you're getting on this is because of tribalism. About a month ago, I simply asked if people can be friends with somebody who is conservative, and I got yelled at. Someone also implied that I'm not a pure enough lefty because my father is conservative. This is bullshit, and I feel like this happens a lot on the left, especially, like if you connect, or like if you agree, like with a person who is seemingly on the right, then there's something wrong with you. When the idea should be like, especially if they're in the working class, no, actually we agree. Let's talk about it and let's see how we can, work together to actually get this shit done.
Yeah.
So I think I have, is that it?
I think so.
Oh no,
you have this one.
No, I had one more. I thought I did. So I had one more tweet, So I mentioned this last week. I tweeted out, it's about time that the true left stops getting into these petty personality wars and start to learn what organization is, so we can actually get something done, something policy-wise that's not a crumb. Many of these leftists are gatekeepers. We have to take the power away from them too. And what I mean is, it's like, I think especially in this space, who is dictating a lot of what we should think about, or what we should be doing or not doing, is mostly these big channels like TYT, and it's like, they're afraid of us because we're actually, one, working class, and like can actually speak to the issues in a way that they necessarily can't, because we're on the ground and we see this every day, while they're in their studios, many of them, kind of shielded and isolated from the realities of what working class people are going through. So the idea of organizing is the idea of like, we're taking power away from the elite.
Yeah.
You know, so basically in this tweet, I'm saying the people within the space, like in the space, like who are really real about actually getting something for the working class as far as policy, those people that, you know, that we need to take power from are these bigger channels, you know, because they're pushing us towards the wrong thing, which is essentially pushing us towards the Democratic Party, who has done, well, both parties, but I think right now, especially the Democratic Party, who's done shit for people.
Yeah.
You know, so I think really, and I think Bree said it beautifully, you know, I don't agree with Bree with everything all the time, but she was definitely right on this. And I think that's definitely the part of the clip that I wanted to show and kind of encourage you all. Like, these personality beasts, like, oh, Jimmy Dore bad and like whatever else, is just a distraction. Because you know what? Like, I challenge any one of these trolls or any one, like one of these people who have disagreements, you know, just as far as policy and any of this.
Yeah.
Come on the show. Like, come on the show. I know Nick has offered any of these people who kind of disagree, like kind of say have Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome. He's offered, you know, on his Collin shows, if you have a disagreement, talk about it. They don't. So it's like, either you know that we're talking, right? Even we know that we're talking about the right thing, or you really don't have shit to say.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, and like, as I'm saying this, like, I think my mind is somewhat changing on things that I've said in terms that I would never go on certain channels. Like, I think I need to kind of call myself out a little bit on that, because, you know, I think especially in light of this, if we are truly wanting to build coalitions and understanding one among each other, we have to talk.
Yeah.
So I think I'm definitely kind of changing my stance on that a little bit somewhat. But I think ultimately, you know, it's the idea of like, stick to the policy, not the personality. And we'll get a lot farther ahead than what we are right now on the left.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Human Low Solidarity talking about the gatekeepers gives them power. I agree and disagree.
Agreed, but I think if we talk about them in the right way of what we need to do
as gatekeepers,
as far as taking away that power from them, I think it's valid. Like, to get caught up in the drama of it all, you know, like, yes, I think that's definitely true. But I think ultimately it's like, I wanted to play that clip, not so much for Cenk, but what Bree was saying that I think is kind of pertinent to what we said on this channel before and other channels have said. You know, like, you have to talk to people who are not like you in order to build coalitions. You know, that's not talked about as much on the left anymore. You know, so that's something we need to kind of get back to in order to try and attempt to get something done. Because that's how they're winning. That's how the divisions are made. It's like, this person is for this policies and it's bad. So like, therefore that person or anyone that's associated with them is bad. Which is what Cenk tried to do with Bree, and Bree basically
slapped it away
within 10 minutes.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I wanted to bring some international story to people's attention. So, Iran submits a written response in nuclear deal talks. So, Tehran under hardline President Ibrahim Raisi, how do you say his last name? I forget. I think it's like Raisi or something like that. Something like that. Has repeatedly tried to blame Washington for the delay in reaching an accord. So, this is by John Gambrell at the AP. So keep that in mind. AP sometimes is weird. So Iran said Tuesday, and this is from the UAP, the UAE AP specifically. Iran said Tuesday it submitted a written response to what has been described as a final roadmap to restore its tattered nuclear deal with world powers. Iran's state-run IRNA news agency offered no details on the substance of its response, but suggested that Tehran still wouldn't take the EU mediated proposal, despite warnings there would be no more negotiations. The differences are on 3 issues in which the United States has expressed its verbal flexibility in 2 cases, but it should be included in the text. The IRNA report said the third issue is related to guaranteeing the continuation of the deal, which depends on the realism of the United States. So, Tehran, under hardline President Ibrahim Raisi, has repeatedly tried to blame Washington for the delay in reaching an accord. Monday was reported to have been a deadline for Iran's response. Nabila Mizrahi, a spokesperson for the EU on foreign affairs and security policy, told the AP that the EU received Iran's response on Monday night. We were studying it and are consulting with the other JCPOA participants and the U.S. on the way ahead, she said, using an acronym for the formal name for the nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. So, the EU has been the go-between in the indirect talks as Iran refused to negotiate directly with America since then President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew the U.S. from the accord in 2018. From Washington, State Department spokesman Ned Price said the U.S. would share its own response to the EU. We do, however, with the EU's fundamental point, agree, however, with the EU's fundamental point, and that is that what could be negotiated has been negotiated, Price said. He added that Iran had been making unacceptable demands going beyond the text of the 2015 nuclear deal, which saw Iran drastically limit its enrichment of uranium in exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions. If Iran wants these sanctions lifted, they will need to alter the underlying conduct, Price said. They will need to change the dangerous activities that gave rise to these sanctions in the first place. As of the last public count, Iran has a stockpile of some 3,800 kilos of enriched uranium. Under the deal, Tehran could enrich uranium to 3.67% purity while retaining a stockpile of uranium of 300 kilos under constant scrutiny of surveillance cameras and international inspectors. So, Iran now enriches uranium up to 60% purity, a level it never reached before, and one that is a short technical step away from 90%. Non-proliferation experts warn Iran now has enough 60% enriched uranium to reprocess into fuel for at least one nuclear bomb. Meanwhile, the surveillance cameras have been turned off and other footage have been seized by Iran. However, Iran still would need to design a bomb and a delivery system for it, likely a months-long project. Tehran insists its program is peaceful, though the West and the International Atomic Energy Agency said Iran had an organized military nuclear program until 2003. So, thoughts, Collin?
So basically the West is afraid. Very afraid.
Yes. Yeah, and Tehran's like, what the fuck are you gonna do? Y'all are fucking this up. Right. You want the deal? This is what the deal is. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, which I love that. I love how it's just sneaky, like, passive-aggressive. Like, no, Like, you know, like, that's pretty much what it is. Like, which is great that our political, you know, and possibly global annihilation is just, you know,
because God forbid,
children running things.
We can't be the only ones that can nuke a country at a moment's notice.
God forbid. We're the only ones who've ever used it. God forbid that someone else might have them and do it to us. God forbid. We were like, hey, you think that the thing we used is bad. Y'all don't use that.
Right.
But so, anyway.
Yeah, that overall, that just kind of sums up my thoughts on it. It's like, America has the authority to blow you up, but we be damned if you even attempt it. You know, like, especially given that you're in the Middle East.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, I think it's just kind of the hypocrisy there that I think is just amusing, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you know, if you want to kind of talk about us and how we need to protect ourselves or whatever else, Iran has that same right too. Any country has that right to protect itself. So, you know, like, if you don't want that to happen, then maybe talk about like some type of, you know, diplomacy, you know, I don't know, like
would be a smart move.
Right. And Kelly's like, and yet Israel does exactly, you know, it's kind of like,
and the Saudis and like they do whatever, you know.
But Iran, it's no, they can't. So it's like, you know, shut up. They're like, you know, if they have that right too, in the same way that we give ourselves that right, you know. So, whatever.
Yeah, but see, we're going to apply economic sanctions on them if they don't. So,
right.
And they're like, you know, like at this point, I'm betting they're like, whatever. We dealt with them already. Like, apparently economic sanctions in Iran are set to like do some pretty like bad shit as far as that's concerned, but like medicine and stuff like that we're not, you know, but anyway, just America being the bad guy in multiple places at once.
Right.
But
speaking of America being bad in many places, including our own backyard.
Yeah.
Great segue, Reef. So I actually forgot that Professor Wolff, well, I don't think it's him tweeting this out. I think he has like
a handler
an intern or somebody does this for him. But I think, you know, I just kind of came upon this over the weekend, which I'm like, ooh, Professor Wolff. And like, so he tweeted out, inside a declining US capitalism below leaders babbling about economic problems, policies, and a strong consumer, a savage working class rages. Hashtag we can do better than capitalism.
Yep.
So he tweeted out this, hold on.
There you go.
There we go. So he tweeted out this Yahoo News article about evictions, and I joked about this, but, you know, joking aside, you know, certain squad members talked about this last year.
Yeah.
On the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
Fake bleep out for this.
Notice me, Senpai. Notice me.
What? Yes,
except
Collin.
I wouldn't call them senpai.
No, it's like everyone's, you notice me. Like I was there. I said the 10%, you know, that was me.
Yeah, we should clip that though too.
Well, yeah. What about the 10%?
Right. But I think in this case, what about the 99?
Right.
You know, what about us? You know, because evictions are still happening. I'm sure many of you know this.
Yeah.
You know, because you guys are very smart. And you guys are
housing
aware of what's happening.
Should be a human right, yes.
Right. You know, but evictions spiking as assistance protections disappear.
Yay.
Okay, so Jada Riley thought she had beaten homelessness. The 26-year-old New Orleans resident was finally making a steady income cleaning houses during the pandemic to afford a $700 a month one-bedroom apartment. Where's that in DC?
Oh my God, yeah.
It probably wasn't that nice though, knowing the gentrification.
I mean, in New Orleans, we're to $700 a month, one bedroom. If it tells me where it was, but yeah, go ahead.
I don't think it was probably that nice of an apartment.
No, it's probably
given the gentrification.
Yeah, West Side.
I digress.
You know, West Bank, right there by the police department.
Probably.
You know, a little duplex.
But she
shotgun
lost
houses.
nearly all of her clients after Hurricane Ida hit last year. Then she was fired from a grocery store job in February after taking time off to help a relative. 2 months behind her rent, she made the difficult decision last month to leave her apartment rather than risk an eviction judgment on her record. Now she's living in her car with her 6-year-old son, sometimes spending nights at the apartments of her friends or her son's father. I slept outside for a whole year before. It's very depressing. I'm not gonna lie, said Riley, who often doesn't have enough money to buy gas or afford food every day. I don't want to have my son experience any struggles that I went through. Eviction filings nationwide have steadily risen in recent months and are approaching or exceeding pre-pandemic levels in many cities and states. That's in stark contrast to the pandemic, when state and federal moratoriums on evictions, combined with $46.5 billion in federal emergency rental assistance, kept millions of families housed. I really think this is the tip of the iceberg, Shannon McKenzie, executive director of Colorado Poverty Law Project, said of June filings in Denver, which were about 24% higher than the same time 3 years ago. Our numbers of evictions are increasing every month at an astonishing rate, and I just don't see that abating anytime soon. According to the Eviction Lab, several cities are running far above historic averages. with Minneapolis, St. Paul 91% higher in June, Las Vegas up 56%, Hartford, Connecticut up 32%, and Jackson, Florida, down the road from you, up 17%.
Yeah.
In Maricopa County, home to Phoenix, guess Arizona, eviction filings in July were the highest in 13 years, officials said. Some legal advocates said that the sharp increase in housing prices due to inflation is partially to blame. Rental prices nationwide are up nearly 15% from a year ago and almost 25% from 2019, according to the real estate company Zillow. Rental vacancy rates, meanwhile, have declined to a 35-year low of 5.8%, according to the Census Bureau.
Right.
Really?
Yeah, because, yes. Like,
explain that.
Because like they're essentially not looking at all the data. Like they're looking at data that the census provided. And so like if you don't put all your census information properly, or if you don't file things correctly, like that's you know what I mean? It's like it only can see the amount of people that are like currently unemployed, like currently on unemployment. Like there's that, you know what I mean? Like they just, it's weird statistics that way, but yeah. So like they're just not looking at the right stuff pretty much.
Yeah, I just feel like that seems kind of low to me. Like low, not in a good way. You know, like if anything, that I feel that number should be higher.
Yeah.
You know, but I think we can do some research on that to see. But anyway, a report last month from the National Low Income Housing Coalition found that a tenant working full-time needs to make nearly $26 per hour on average nationally to afford a modest two-bedroom rental and $21.25 an hour for a one-bedroom.
Yeah.
Federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour.
Right.
Landlords are raising the rent and making it very unaffordable for tenants to stay, said Margaret Marie Chang Yuan, the Eviction Initiative Project Director for the National Housing Law Project. Inflation has really shrunk the supply of housing that is available for people with the lowest incomes, she added. Without more protections in place, which not all states have, a lot of families will be rendered homeless. Actually, along with that, you know, even if like, and I saw this in a local news report, you know, here, I think maybe yesterday, like tenants, like landlords are not taking, you know, Section 8 vouchers necessarily now.
Yeah.
So, which is also exacerbating the problem.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
which is crazy.
Patrick McLeod, Chief Executive Director of the Virginia Apartment Management Association, said that the trend is a return to normal, okay? No one likes evictions, but they're in some ways a reset to the economy. Okay, McLeod said, adding that evictions have been artificially depressed.
Yeah.
Right. Housing is based on supply and demand, and when no one moves and you have no vacancies, you have a tight market and prices go up. Right. Graham Bowman, a staff attorney with Legal Aid Social Society of Columbus, Ohio, said eviction there are rising 15% above historic averages in June alone, at a time when there are fewer places for those forced out to go. Cheryl Lee Smith was evicted in May from a two-bedroom apartment in Columbus after she used her rent to repair a sewage leak in the basement. Smith, who is legally blind and has a federal housing voucher, fears she won't be able to find anything by September when her voucher expires because of rising housing prices and the eviction on her record.
Yeah.
It's very scary, said Smith, 53, whose temporary stay at a hotel funded through a state program ends this weekend.
Right.
In Boise, Idaho, Jeremy McKinney, 45, moved into his car last week after a judge sided with a property management company that nearly tripled the rent of his two-bedroom house. The Lyft and DoorDash driver will have to rent a hotel room whenever he has custody of his children, 9 and 12. It's definitely mind-blowing, said McKinney, after that everything on the market is beyond his reach, even after a nonprofit offered to cover the security deposit. I've never been homeless before. I've always had a roof over my head. The other challenge is the federal emergency rental assistance that helped keep millions housed during the pandemic has dried up in some jurisdictions or have been increasingly rejected by some landlords. What really gets me is that there's rental assistance and so many landlords just don't want it. They'd rather throw away someone on the street than take the money. Eric Hortler, management attorney of the Lone Star State Legal Aid's Eviction Right to Counsel project, which covers Houston and Harris County in Texas. If you take the money, you can't evict them. They want them out.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? I felt like you had something you wanted to say.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to make sure Kelly M got, that there are millions of empty houses in this country, and not only are evictions rising, landlords who had to ease up on rent during the pandemic have arbitrarily started raising rents because they can.
Yeah, and to unaffordable levels for a lot of people, especially not every state is able to offer does offer, or certain companies don't offer like a 15
well, the fact that
wage, which even with that is not enough.
No,
now, especially with inflation right now.
Yeah,
and this Reef. I'm going to be moving into a new apartment next month. I actually was very lucky that I found one that's somewhat below market rate here in DC. Which is amazing, but at the same time kind of sad, considering how much you have to pay even for a studio apartment, in DC, but the cost, is unlike, even for me, I don't want to spend all of my money on rent. So trying to find one that doesn't basically take away all your money, from your check, your paycheck every month, it was kind of the challenge for me, because I can easily spend over $2,000 alone
on something fairly basic,
right.
Yeah.
Depending where I'm at. But anyway, where am I?
You are next slide. Yeah.
Thank you. The U.S. Treasury said last week that more than $40 billion of the $46.5 billion in emergency rental assistance has to be spent or allocated. According to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Virginia have gone through at least 90% of their first disbursement. 12 states and DC have used 50% of the second allocation, known as ERA2, by the end of May. 3, Idaho, Ohio, and Iowa haven't spent any ERA2 money, and 2, Nebraska and Arkansas didn't accept the funds. The public health emergency may still be there, but the funds to deal with it are rapidly disappearing, said Martin Wegbrit, Director of Litigation for the Central Virginia Legal Aid Society. Treasury is encouraging states and cities to tap other federal stimulus funds to cover the gaps. So far, over 600 state and local governments have budgeted $12.9 billion in stimulus funds to meet housing needs, including affordable housing development. Gene Sperling, who oversees President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus rescue package, highlighted the success of its rental assistance program, which has reached 7 million mostly low-income households. But more needs to be done to ensure the country doesn't return to pre-pandemic times when 3.6 million tenants were evicted annually, and evictions were too often a first resort, not a last resort, he told a forum on eviction reforms at the White House last week. Some lawmakers said the answer is a permanent rental assistance program. A bill introduced last month would provide $3 billion annually for rental assistance and fund services to keep families housed. A study commissioned by the National Department Association and the National Multifamily Housing Council said the answer is building 4.3 million apartments by 2025. Now, the question is this, well, I don't even want to say affordable housing anymore because they're not.
Yeah. That's like justice reform instead of abolishing.
But housing for all.
Yeah.
Really. That's really what we should be talking about.
Yeah. Very much so.
Housing guarantee. That's really what we should be speaking of.
Housing as a human right. almost like we've been arguing this for the last like 5-6 decades, you know. Right. So yeah, some more.
Yep, I think I have 2 more slides after this. So cool. Other advocates call for permanent legal protections like right to counsel for tenants or eviction diversion programs to resolve evictions before they reach the courts. In Richmond, Virginia, eviction filings in June were 54% below historic averages, attributed to rental assistance and more legal representation for tenants in court, Redbridge said. Similar programs were credited with New Mexico's eviction filings being 29% below historic averages in June. Philadelphia, which passed a law making eviction diversion mandatory through this year, saw filings down 33%. The City Council of Philadelphia also approved spending $30 million over 2 years for rental assistance. We are trying to change the way we look at this issue in Philadelphia, where the only thing you can do is go to landlord-tenant court or start an eviction, said Anderson, supervising attorney with Philadelphia Legal Assistance, who oversees the paralegals on the Save Your Home Philly hotline. Oh, cool. That's it.
Yep. I also, you know, we talked about last week, you know, tenant unions as well. Which nice little continuation there, from Collin. So people should go back should have the clips up if people want to go to the channels.
Clips are up now. They're live now. So yeah, like we talked about, you know, basically the idea that landlords now are trying to increase their rent, I think in part due to, you know, like
wanting to recoup pandemic loss
from pandemic. In addition to gentrified areas are now trying to kick out certain tenants in order to renovate, in the case that we talked about in it's outside Toronto, like this one complex where they're trying to, they were saying like, oh, once you
like renovating,
we'll bring you back in. But in reality, they're trying to renovate
and then increase price hike,
increase the rent for them to leave. And get get new tenants who are able to afford it in.
Yeah,
it's all about geometry.
It is, Shaq. You know, right, it is about geometry. You gotta follow that geometry. But anyway, that's it. That's the show for this evening. So Thursday, tomorrow, I think me and Indy have stuff planned to watch. But I'm not sure if anyone's going to be streaming to the network. Friday, I should be doing a show. I'll figure out if I can get guests. If not, I might just take a Friday off, you know. We'll see.
How do we miss that Sunday?
Yes. Yep. And Tara Monday. And, you know, INN News next Wednesday. Same bat time, same bat channel. But anyway, if you want to find all those bat names and bat channels, go in the description below. Find indienews.network. You'll see in the no fun cat videos to end on. I will definitely make sure there's cat videos this week. I have stuff saved, so you know we'll definitely do a double dose of boats next Sunday if not. But yeah, if you want to go to that,
I think she's saying Kelly qualified. I think because some of these stories are depressing. I think just something to kind of liven, bring us spirits.
Right.
I think it's something you can play now.
I got that. If she wants Warren saying Kitty, I do have that. But you know,
hopefully the Kitty clearly soundbite helps.
Yeah, I agree.
Warren, Uncle Warren.
So, but you know, we should put it on Spotify and make sure he gets like ad donos on that. You know, just on that alone, 1 MP4, 2 seconds of audio. But anyway, yeah, go down there in the description, find that indienews.network link.
You know what? Like, just in line what Kelly's saying, you know, so I don't want to give too many details, but we had an interview. Indy and I had an interview yesterday. Unfortunately, the sound didn't work.
Yeah, so we're gonna redo that and hopefully get that out.
I think, but I think this can be an opportunity where we're able to support people who need it.
Yeah.
I know money is tight right now, but I think, those who are able to help in tangible ways or looking for ways that are looking to kind of support people, maybe in your community, maybe not, that this could be a tangible way to help people. Yeah. So hopefully, Kelly, that might help. I know it's kind of a depressing time, but I think if you're able to, this might be a way to kind of lift your spirits a little bit. So like I said, we had the interview, the sound, no work. So we hope to interview with this person again. Yeah. But tune into the network because we might do something with the footage that we have. Yeah. As kind of like a teaser. Yep. Maybe we'll figure it out. But I think either way, it'll be something that I think you guys would be very interested in. That I think you should. Tune in.
Please help keep your brothers and sisters afloat as the world drowns. Again, down in that doobly-doo below, you'll see it scrolling across the screen right now. IndieNews.network if you want to go there. You can click Meet the Members, and you'll find ways to support all the members of INN if you want to help keep them afloat, as well as you'll find links to find all the channels, social media, and places we upload videos to. So please go give those a follow and a sub if you can, and feel free to support any way you know how. We appreciate all the love that our audience gives us. So, but anyway, I think that's it for tonight. So, as always, labels are bad. Please stay independent.
And keep it up, guys. I know it's hard, but try and find something that can brighten your spirits up this week. A little bit. So,
find some weed. That helps me, Yeah. So, anyway.
Also, let us know any stories you want us to report on. Let us know. I will try and report on them.
Use that hashtag capital INN lowercase news. You'll find that. I should put that in the ticker there. But anyway, that's it for us this evening. Labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Good night.